It's Lou Paints, a miniature painting coach. And we're doing some long form painting at night. And because at this stage we really need to get and filter out and blends out to make all the transitions smooth. So for this video, I'll be speeding the video up. It will be a long video, and I'll speeding up the video and I'll be talking over it after this point. So I actually have a new setup over here. I don't know if you guys can see this, but it's really quite a like I have this stand over here with my camera looking at the miniature, and my miniature is being balanced on this this kind of lever over here, and so I have this setup that I'm actually really excited to test out. So let's just get to painting. Okay, so here's the speed paint in its beginning. So I'm doing this as a post-mortem, and it's been a few days. I purposely took a break before doing the voiceover for this recording, because it'd be good to see in retrospect how my painting process was like, and kind of look over the weaknesses and the strength of the things that I was doing, and perhaps ways and I could be improving. So this is a speed up video, and like I've mentioned several times now, and the funny thing is that because this video is apparently in half-hour commentary, so I had to record something like a 2.5-hour footage. Now here's a bit of trivia that I'm kind of doing all the video editing over on my iPad, so I don't have a lot of space on my iPad. I only have like 256 gigs to work on, which does include the system files and the recording files and the apps and pretty much everything. So when I dumped this recording over, what happened was, well, my iPad just completely went to bulk, and I needed to reset my iPad, which was pretty funny. It was an inconvenience, but funny otherwise. Now, anyways, so back to the video. This is, yes, it's my first time recording a time lapse. I believe some artists mistakenly call this a speed paint. It's not a speed paint unless you're actually painting at speed. Having painting normally and then speeding up a video into a faster video, it's not exactly speed painting. Although it would be great if we all could work in our painting while still breaking the sound barrier. That would be hilarious. Now, I want to talk about the thing that I'm doing here. Is you can see I'm kind of going over her boob, the Bretonnian Sorceress left boob, and so I'm just going over with highlights and kind of going over the under boob to kind of lining up. And this is not to create highlights or anything. It's really, I'm at the detailing stage of making this model really stand out and believable. And in my head, after defining the right tones for the Bretonnian Sorceress, now see, the Bretonnian Sorceresses are all inspiration of the Green Lady in Arthurian mythology. And so the Green Lady is usually a blonde or brunette in a rather transparent kind of lady of the lake like clothing. And so more often than not, her robes, her drapes, and her overall dress has bits of transparency to it, particularly to show the femininity and to show the maturity of a female figure, and how the men or the knights in the Bretonnian or King Arthurian lore kind of strive towards. Is that mythos of wanting to please the mother and wanting to please the lady and to court the ideal woman by being the best man. I'm oversimplifying it, of course, but this is kind of where it goes. So now, why am I talking about the lore rather than the technique? That's because whenever I paint, I'm always thinking about what the angle would be like to suit the needs of the final model that I have in my head. Now, I have no photographic memory or anything like that. While I do my research to develop the imagination that I have as far as I can, and I do have an image in my head, that image is still generally vague, and it's more vague depending on how comfortable I am in working with so and so color. So in this case, I'm working from the chroma range of anything from lime green to a grayish green to a green that's already towards the indigo and the blues and the cyans. And so they hardly look like green, they look more like seawater. And while I'm blending these colors together, because green is such a vast color, it's actually the most widest of all the hues and colors of the color family, of all the main hues, which is the cyan, magenta, yellows, and then you have the red, blue, blues, and the greens. The green, and this is coming from a printing and a digital painting color theory and color knowledge. It's different from the traditional color spectrum, which is just simply of primaries of red, yellow, and blue. So these are the fundamentals in color which an artist has to think about when painting, more than just using traditional mediums. And so more often than not, I'm kind of thinking about, if this character was in a physical plane and I could meet this character and I could stand out and I could reach this character, what colors in there, in like physics, in what humans are the most sensitive human, or at least I'm capable of, in being able to view now, what kinds of colors would I be able to see accurately as I can. And you know, there's these are the sorts of things which people who do video editing and do color correction have to think about. And so you can kind of see where I'm exploring the greens to suit that transparency over her robe that I've kind of gone over her left breast, which is on our right. And you can kind of see where I added like moments of transparency to it, and then for the overall skin, and then bringing back the saturation from the cloth, because it's if you've ever looked at if you're old enough to be looking at women in transparent or wet clothing, and you do the research to identify how the colors go for that, you often find that when women are in transparent or wet clothing, and when they face light, it's usually the transparency that's facing the light that really shows the skin underneath. It's less so on the sides where it's in the dark. Somehow in the dark, the clothing seems to take more of its local color and blends with the colors that go into the dark. So what I mean by that is, when the human eye goes into the darks, we see more of blue and we see less of most other colors, and especially among the reds and the yellows. And this is not a video to be discussing as something as complicated as that, but it's something which I need to mention, because that's kind of how my thought process is when I'm looking at this miniature. And mainly the challenges that I'm facing is because this miniature is so small. But besides that, like, I'm trying to identify how do I want the colors to be like if they're facing towards the light versus they're not facing towards the light. And I'm adjusting the values of the light from the shadows to the darkness to kind of suit that. So I'm actually going from the local color of her robes and introducing the transparency while also introducing the light uh, facing towards the subject, which is our sorceress over here. Meaning that uh, I'll be defining anything to do with wrinkles, anything to do with creases, and things like that, which eventually I'll have to freehand. But at this stage, I'm just kind of looking for where those colors belong to. And right now, you see me just kind of going over the darks with matte varnish. And the reason why I'm going over it with matte varnish is because it makes it easier to paint over it, because the darks that I generally use is satin. It's of a satin finish, because it's easier to run a satin finish inks or paints uh, because they generally are not harsh, they're smooth because of the intended finish of the paints. So they go into those crevices and they kind of wash, or they kind of sneak into all the tiny little crevices a lot more easier. And so if you take the time and pause the video and you skip it to the beginning, you have found that the colors on the dress or her robe has kind of changed dramatically, because we kind of moved over from the lights that were shining on the miniature, the warm lights, and then the cool darks. And what happened was that it took the color temperature, and now we're also implementing the changes because of the texture and the finish of her robe, which she would be otherwise wearing. So there's a lot of thought put into the matter of her dressing, her clothing, the texture, things like these. And this is just the kind of the base of the model, and it's like the model just kind of spazzes out for a moment. I can't recall why, but I think I was trying to fit the miniature in such a way so the camera could see me working on the face, which at this point I'm also preparing the tones on the face to work with the details later on. And you can see me also over here, I'm kind of refilling my wet palette. I do live in Malaysia, which is in the equator, but pretty much we're just above it, so paints dry up really fast and water evaporates really quick. So if I don't constantly do wet palette maintenance, my paints are just gonna die on me. So I don't want mixed paints to die on me. So and here I am just kind of cleaning up the local color of the face and kind of figuring out where the lights and darks should be. And the face as it is now, I keep saying that this miniature is almost 70%, but really that last 30%, last 30-40% is always the most difficult to get through, because they are so tiny and just kind of have to make those color changes and those details shift. And so it's mostly working with a very thin level of wet blending. Like it doesn't seem like wet blending, it seems mostly like thin glazes. But what I'm really doing is I'm still using the same old method, which is kind of putting droplets of really tiny droplets of medium and then of the paints, and then just kind of moving them around to kind of see if they can get the colors that I want them to get. And with this color over here, I don't think that even after this session I was completely satisfied. In fact, I felt that it was quite bad. And so I'm probably going to have to touch up the color a lot more, because it should not just be feel like a red, and unfortunately the details at this point are so tiny that I don't have enough brushes to work on the tiny details. So I actually went and bought more. So, and I will at least outline and tidy up the strokes of the patterns around that collar to better frame the head, because if I want to get the to finish the color temperature and the translucency of the robe, then I'll need to make sure that the local color of that collar on that dress or robe be of the right color, and it needs to be properly defined. So the robe color of what she's wearing around there, it's really a kind of like a maroon to magenta, and a white triangles kind of back and forth. So I don't know if the finish will be ultimately this color, but that's kind of what I've decided on. And here's the blue outline kind of going over it, just to show that occlusion, which is the embossing shadow that's created by patterns kind of rising on clothing, which will need to get cleaned up eventually a lot more. I'm just kind of going over through the dark colors to make those whites stand out, and kind of adding those tiny minute highlights to it. So, and cleaning up. Now, another thing I want to mention of the Bretonnian Sorceress and why I found her really difficult to paint is because while she is a metal model, the the real difficulty of painting on her is because I don't feel like I primed her that well. Essentially, this miniature was already painted when I first got it, so this is a second-hand miniature, and whoever I got it from had already painted the miniature itself, and so I didn't really take time to kind of dump this in like a tub and to get the paint off or anything like that. I just don't do that. What I do is I immediately prime it, and I probably should have primed it black before going to white. I have cleaned up paints on miniatures before, like completely from scratch, and kind of just paint it from a reset. But I generally choose to save more time and not do that because I've never really found it a use of time. However, with something that is this small and me going at it with such a finish, I probably should have done that. And yet, I don't know if it's the best decision because I kind of also like the fact that there are some textures around here and there. It's just that when it came to working with the hair in particular, that it was just a murder. So here I am kind of going over through the eyes and the face, kind of making sure I get those tones right, and to kind of get the whites on both sides. So I don't know if in this attempt I was particularly satisfied about it at the end, but I believe that it wasn't because at this point I'm already kind of reworking the entire face. Sorry, not from a reset. I'm not painting over anything. It's just that I'm making the wrinkles, making those eyes, putting color to it, because I do want to add a pupil, and at the time of me doing this voiceover, I've already added pupils and other stuff like that, and just kind of generally have kind of featured more of her face, and her face will actually be pretty much done 100% pretty soon. It's just that kind of looking back at this time lapse, I'm realizing now that I was spending so much more time on the local color, probably because I didn't have a real plan on how to engage her eyes. So you can see me just kind of messing around her face another time, just to kind of figure out which colors I want. Do I want her eyeballs to be like at the far right of the viewer, or far like at the center? Like what's she looking at exactly? Because once you've kind of defined where the eyes are looking at, it's going to be a task of lightening up the eyelids and the bottom eyelid, the upper and bottom eyelid, to show the definition of where her eyes looking at in particular. And the thing about drawing eyes is that, so you're never really just drawing the eyes themselves, you're also drawing the cheeks and the towards the eyebrows to really animate the character of the any model or any character that's being drawn or worked on or painted. And so I believe at this point, like although I've kind of defined the model and can see that this I think for most people would be pretty satisfactory, and like I'm still so far from not being satisfied with the face, because me personally, I came from a background of doing illustration, so the face to me is such an important part, especially for a lady, and I dislike the idea of cheapening on the effort and quality of how I could accentuate certain details of the feminine face. And so you can kind of see where I've hit a point where I decided to stop. And so right now her face as it is, it's actually pretty done. And I think most people would just kind of call it done. And to me, no, like this is still, the face really has only just begun to take off, because I finally got to the detail stage, and I'm just kind of correcting all the tiny little skin tones to fit the color temperature, to fit the reflections from the clothing, and to kind of accentuate the differences between the skin and the robes a little bit more. And so I can see that for now, looking back at the video, that I was kind of making sure the luminosity of the robe would kind of reflect back onto her side boobs. And I can see here that what I'm looking for specifically is mistakes, or the kind of small little reflections on the face. So you can see me just kind of adding a small little green line to the sorceress's right side, from our point of view, in the right side of her face, and just kind of adding a little bit to her left, because I'm kind of taking note how the colors would bounce off around her robe, and then onto her blonde hair, because her blonde hair is white, whitish blonde at the end, and so it should reflect back some of the robe's colors back on the face. And now it's just kind of going through that translucency again, making sure the warmthness of that skin is, when it's underneath a green clothing, it goes into a gray. So I'm making sure to touch that up, to make sure that's represented properly on the clothing, and then add the cooler colors to the clothing, the cooler temperature. So see how odd as it is, at the beginning I had a complete undercoat that was not even green. Like I took turquoise and yellow and kind of mixed it from the beginning, wet blended on this miniature, and it was like a bright green. It's not the brightest green, but it's a bright green enough to show that it's a leafy green, a green lady green. And you can't really have a green lady green without having teal on the clothing. It's just not the green lady if you don't have that kind of same green as you'd have from the Green Knight green, because you have that really ethereal look almost not being there. And I'm not quite sure why there's a break. I probably went to fill something out. Well, apparently I did. My water was too dirty probably. And here I am just kind of cleaning up the miniature, and it's like a never-ending process. I've noticed that the trends now on painting miniatures have kind of changed recently on Instagram. Since I restarted miniature painting to something that's a lot more vibrant and colorful, and the colors are almost cartoonish, a little bit too cartoonish for my taste, because I have always personally enjoyed looking at miniatures which have a lot of fantasy colors to it and fantasy elements, but a much more realistic undertone. So when you look at the miniature, you kind of feel like it's part of a universe where you can kind of exist in. And it's heavily inspired by the older Magic the Gathering or Forgotten Realms novels. So if you're not familiar with that, if you know a game that's called Neverwinter Nights, the first one or the second one, games like Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, and there's a very heavy solemn feeling with those pieces of high fantasy lore. So I actually really enjoy having those kind of colors and those kind of appeals to this universe. It's almost it's not quite classical, and it still has so much vibrancy to it, and yet the lights and shadows feel like they are pretty stark and not grim either. So it's quite a tricky place to be in. And so that's how the finish I want to have for this miniature. So see, I am kind of going over the other side of the her robe and dress, doing the same thing because it's kind of in the darks, and I need to get all those creases. I need to define them. Really, the detailing stage is just so much fun. I'm at the point where all I'm doing here is I get to really define the parts where I feel like I'm touching the miniature, as if it was a person. Like I'm putting my hands down and feeling like where would the ropes kind of drape by gravity, where would the small little sparks kind of be on the miniature. So I'm just kind of fooling around here. And it's like I have an image in my head that's kind of vague, and I'm just kind of fulfilling the parts, and making changes on the go if it's necessary. I do realize that at this side of the miniature, like you don't see me going from not necessarily from a warm to cool tone, although it's still a green going to a indigo or violet. I don't treat it according to the I would say the color temperature cheat sheet, which is go from warms to cools, like warm lights, cool darks. Like that rule doesn't exactly apply all the time, and neither does cool lights, warm darks. Rather, for me, I'm just kind of putting the highlights depending on where the certain lights are shining. And this part is just the most important part, to define the real shape, the real minute shape of the miniature before I go in and really add the minor creases and the microtones on the miniature. And that's that. Well, that's the video done. I hope you guys enjoyed this voiceover, and well, maybe I'll try this again the next time. Bye. Oh, and remember, be sure to learn from others if you want to discover more of yourself. All right? Take care.